Before we witness a moment that shatters worlds, hit that subscribe button and like this video, and tell me in the comments, what's the most unexpected thing that's ever happened to you? The billionaire and his unexpected son. The late afternoon sun, a molten gold, glazed the towering glass facade of Sterling Enterprises, casting long, sharp shadows across the bustling city street below. Employees, figures of immaculate precision in expensive suits and polished shoes, flowed in and out of the building's grand entrance, a constant tide of ambition and success. And then, a sound, sharp and piercing, sliced through the air, freezing the carefully choreographed rhythm of the financial world. You're Maximilian Sterling, aren't you? Maximilian Sterling, the man whose name was synonymous with power, who held the city's skyline in his grasp, froze mid-stride. A moment ago, his mind had been exclusively on market futures and the next high-stakes negotiation. Now he turned, his cold, Arctic blue eyes narrowing as they landed on a small, defiant figure blocking his path. The boy was thin, heartbreakingly so, his clothes worn and ill-fitting, sneakers scuffed, cheeks just a little too hollow. He looked utterly out of place against the backdrop of polished marble and gleaming glass. But it wasn't the boy's appearance that held Max immobile. It was his eyes, brown, fierce, and blazing with an intensity that belied his size. They locked onto Max's face, unwavering. Before Max, known for his ruthless control and razor-sharp retorts, could utter a single word, the boy drew a shaky breath and yelled, the words echoing off the glass towers, momentarily silencing the city hum. "Mom said you're my dad." A collective gasp rippled through the surrounding crowd. Max's usually unflappable personal assistant, Mr. Davies, paled beside him. Employees stopped walking, heads swiveling, eyes wide with shock and avid curiosity. Even the seasoned security guards hesitated, unsure how to handle the unprecedented intrusion. "My dad." Max stood utterly still, the absurdity of the declaration momentarily rendering him speechless. He stared down at the small face, searching for anything. A prank? A mistake? His child? The concept felt foreign, impossible, ridiculous. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, clipped, and dismissive, a blade designed to cut away the inconvenient truth. "I don't know who you are, kid, and I certainly don't know your mother." But the boy didn't flinch. He stood his ground, a small, ragged warrior facing down a titan. His lower lip trembled, but his fierce gaze never wavered. "You're lying," he shouted, his voice cracking slightly, yet still full of conviction. "Mom would never lie to me. She told me the truth. She told me you left us." Something inside Max, something he kept buried deep beneath layers of control and indifference, shifted at those words. Left us? He hadn't expected anger from the boy, or pain. For the first time, Maximilian Sterling truly looked at the child, at the messy brown hair that seemed oddly familiar, the sharp cheekbones beneath the thin skin, the way he stood his ground, defying a man 5 times his size, refusing to be dismissed. A flicker of something he couldn't name, something unsettling, tugged at Max's chest, but he pushed it down, slamming the internal door shut. "I don't have children." His voice was firm, absolute, designed to end the conversation and the unwelcome connection. The boy's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but his small fists remained clenched. He still refused to back away. You don't even remember her, do you?" he whispered, his voice trembling now, stripped of its bravado. "My mom, Clara Evans." Max's stomach twisted violently. The name. It hit him like a physical blow, like a slap across the face. Clara Evans. A name he hadn't heard, hadn't allowed himself to think about in nearly a decade. For a brief, shattering second, a memory surfaced, unbidden, vivid. Soft laughter like a forgotten melody. A warm touch on his arm that sent shivers down his spine. A whisper of love exchanged under the cover of night. A promise of a future he thought was certain. Then, just as quickly, the memory dissolved, leaving behind the familiar, empty ache where she had once been, where she had simply disappeared without a trace. And now, standing before him, a stark, undeniable reality, was a boy claiming to be his son. Their son. Max's pulse quickened, but he masked it instantly with a practiced mask of cold indifference. "This conversation is over," he stated, his voice regaining its hard edge, and turned to walk away, to escape the unsettling intrusion, to return to the predictable world of deals and dominance. Maximilian Sterling had barely taken 2 steps, the urgent need to distance himself propelling him forward, when a small, surprisingly strong hand grabbed his sleeve. He stopped instantly, not because of the touch itself, but because the boy's voice, small and broken, cracked when he spoke again. "Please." Max turned his head slightly, his jaw tightening, his gaze flicking back to the child. The boy was fighting tears, his lower lip quivering, trying desperately to hold onto his crumbling composure. "Please, please don't walk away from me." Again, the words hit harder than they should have, resonating with an unintended pain that Max didn't understand. Again, he had never walked away from him before, but for the first time in years, perhaps in his entire ruthlessly controlled life, something inside Maximilian Sterling hesitated. And that hesitation, that tiny crack in his impenetrable facade, was the beginning of something he was utterly, profoundly unprepared for. Maximilian Sterling was not a man who lingered on the past. The past, in his world of ruthless forward momentum, was a liability, a distraction, a potential weakness to be compartmentalized and controlled. But that night, as he sat alone in the sterile, silent expanse of his penthouse office, the glittering city lights spread before him like a conquered kingdom, he couldn't shake it. The boy's fierce brown eyes, the ragged clothes, and the name that tasted like ash on his tongue, Clara Evans. It had been 9 years. 9 years since the laughter, the warmth, the whispered promises of forever. 9 years since she had simply vanished, like a light extinguished, leaving behind only a void and the bitter conviction of her betrayal. And now a child with her eyes, calling him dad, accusing him of leaving them. Max should have dismissed it, tagged it as a bizarre, inconvenient incident, instructed security to handle any further disturbances. But something unsettled him, deeply. The boy's certainty, the specific name, and that fleeting, unwanted flicker of familiarity he'd seen in Noah's defiant stance. Maximilian Sterling did not like being unsettled. He picked up the secure line to his assistant. "Davies." "Yes, Mr. Sterling?" Mr. Davies' voice was instantly alert. "Everything you can find on a woman named Clara Evans. Background, current address, employment, anything. Dig deep. I want the file on my desk by morning." "Yes, sir." Immediately. Within hours, a thick file sat on the corner of Max's imposing desk, a mundane object containing the potential to upend his carefully constructed reality. He opened it, his cold logic expecting confirmation of his long-held narrative. Clara, the love of his life, had simply found a better offer, a wealthier man, a more comfortable path, and left him without a word because his money wasn't enough or because she'd used him as a stepping stone. That story, painful as it was, had allowed him to move on, to build higher walls, to become the man who trusted no one. But as he read, his entire world tilted on its axis. The file painted a picture that violently contradicted his assumptions. Clara Evans hadn't disappeared into luxury. She wasn't living a comfortable life somewhere, spending another man's money. No, the address listed was a rundown apartment building in a struggling neighborhood known for its high crime rate. Her employment history showed a relentless grind, 2 jobs concurrently for years. A waitress during the day, a hotel cleaner at night. No socialite circuit, no lavish parties, no family wealth to fall back on. The file chronicled a life of sheer, brutal survival. And there, stark and undeniable, listed on various records like school enrollment and medical forms. A child, Noah, born 8 years ago. Father's name, unknown. Max clenched his jaw, the glossy paper suddenly feeling heavy, impossible. This didn't make sense. The Clara he knew. She was vibrant, laughing, full of life. She challenged him, yes, never intimidated by his wealth or power, but she wasn't desperate. She didn't seem like someone who would disappear and end up here. Memories flooded back, unbidden, hitting him harder than any market crash ever had. Her laughter, bright and effortless, like a melody he could never forget. The way she used to look at him, seeing him, not the sterling name. The nights they spent talking until dawn, making reckless, beautiful plans for a future he thought was more certain than the rising sun. And then, nothing. A sudden, inexplicable void where she had been. He had spent months in a white-hot rage, burying the pain under layers of work and cynicism, convincing himself that she had been just like everyone else in his world. Ambitious, calculating, ultimately choosing money over him. But now, staring at the photos in the file, a tired, drawn woman with dark circles under her eyes, the harsh lines of exhaustion etched onto a face he once knew intimately, and the small, fierce boy with her eyes, doubt, cold and sharp, began to creep in. Had he been wrong? Had Emily Clara really left him by choice? The narrative he had clung to for 9 years, the foundation of his distrust, began to crumble. Her life now didn't fit the story of a woman who had left for a better offer. It fit the story of a woman who had been running, hiding, struggling. Maximilian stood abruptly, shoving the file aside, the polished wood of his desk suddenly feeling cold and alien. There was only one way to get answers that mattered. The files, the facts, they could only tell him so much. Clara Evans owed him an explanation, and Maximilian Sterling was going to get it. The neighborhood was nothing like the world Maximilian Sterling usually inhabited. Here, towering glass facades were replaced by worn brick buildings, designer boutiques by corner bodegas, and the hum of luxury vehicles by the distant wail of sirens. His expensive car, a sleek symbol of his status, felt glaringly out of place parked on the cracked pavement. As he stepped out, he felt the weight of curious stares from passers-by, glances that held suspicion rather than awe. But he didn't care, because inside one of these nondescript buildings, in a cramped apartment, was the woman who had haunted his thoughts and dreams for 9 years. And she owed him answers. Max stood in front of apartment 4B, his jaw clenched, the file detailing Clara Evans's difficult life burning in his mind. He raised his fist and knocked firmly, the sound echoing in the narrow hallway. Seconds later, the door opened, and there she was, Clara Evans, the woman who had once been his everything, the woman who had disappeared without a trace, leaving a void in his life he'd filled with cold ambition. The woman who, even now, despite the lines of fatigue around her eyes and the weariness in her posture, still took his breath away. She froze the moment she saw him, her blue eyes, the same eyes he'd seen in Noah, widening in shock, disbelief, and a flicker of something he couldn't quite read. Her hand, calloused from hard work, gripped the edge of the doorframe, her knuckles turning white. Maximilian. His name left her lips like a whisper, filled with a complex mix of emotions. But before he could react to the sound of his name on her lips after so long, Emily Clara's expression hardened. Her grip on the door tightened, her body shifting as if ready to slam it shut, to shut him out of her life once more. Max stepped forward quickly, stopping the movement of the door with his hand, his voice low, urgent. "Clara, we need to talk." Her lips parted slightly, hesitation flickering across her face, a brief return of the woman he knew. But then the defensive walls slammed back into place. She straightened, her voice firm, cold. "There's nothing to talk about, Maximilian. You made that clear 9 years ago." Max let out a sharp breath, his frustration boiling, years of unanswered questions fueling his intensity. "Don't lie to me, Clara. Not after what happened today." Emily Clara's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing. "I don't know what you're talking about." Max took another step forward, his presence filling the small doorway. "A little boy, Noah. He stood in front of Sterling Enterprises today. He said you told him I was his father." He watched her face closely, searching for a reaction. A flicker of panic crossed her features, a subtle widening of the eyes, a swift intake of breath. And for Maximilian Sterling, that was all the confirmation he needed. Clara. His voice was sharp, demanding, cutting through her denial. Is he my son? Emily Clara swallowed hard, her gaze flickering away for a second before forcing herself to meet his eyes again. She said nothing, her silence a heavy confirmation. Max's patience snapped, years of built-up confusion and pain erupting. Answer me. If he is my son, and you've kept him from me for 8 years, why? His voice dropped lower, dangerously controlled, the quiet intensity more terrifying than a shout. Why did you disappear? Why did you keep him a secret? She let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. But she lifted her chin, a flicker of her old defiance returning. You don't have the right to ask me that, Maximilian. Max's eyes burned, raw with the pain of her words, the perceived injustice. The hell I don't. If he's my son, I have every right. He took a deep breath, trying to rein in the storm of emotions threatening to consume him. Her hands trembled visibly now, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. Her eyes filled with a pain that mirrored his own, but also something else, a profound, weary sorrow. And then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, words that made no sense, words that chipped away at the very foundation of his reality. You were never supposed to find out. You were never supposed to care. Maximilian stilled, the storm inside him momentarily silenced by sheer shock. A sharp, unexplainable pain shot through his chest at the utter wrongness of her statement. What did you just say? Never supposed to care? You think I wouldn't care? That I wouldn't have turned the world upside down looking for you if I knew? Emily Clara let out a bitter, broken laugh, shaking her head, the sound devoid of humor. You didn't look for me, Maximilian. Not once. The accusation hung heavy in the air, a brutal counterpoint to his own pain. Max's mind reeled, grappling with the accusation, the file, the boy, the woman in front of him. I thought you left me. His voice was raw now, stripped bare of the control he usually wielded. I thought you chose someone else, that you didn't want me anymore. Emily Clara's breath hitched, a flicker of pain in her eyes, mirroring his long-held belief. She swallowed hard, tears glistening but not falling, then whispered, her voice barely audible, yet chilling in its implication. That's what they wanted you to think. Maximilian's entire body went still. A cold chill, unconnected to the temperature of the room, ran down his spine. What? Emily Clara met his gaze, and for the first time that night, he saw not just pain and defensiveness, but the stark, terrifying truth in her eyes. The truth he never knew. The truth that had been kept from him, from them both all these years. And Maximilian Sterling, the man who feared nothing, felt a cold, unfamiliar sensation claw at his gut. Something close to fear. Maximilian Sterling stood utterly still, the cold chill that had run down his spine intensifying. What? He repeated, his voice barely audible, the meticulously controlled world he had built around himself beginning to fracture. They? Clara Evans met his gaze, and the raw truth in her eyes was devastating. She took a deep, shaky breath, her fingers curling into small, tight fists at her sides. You think I left you, Maximilian? You think I walked away from the man I loved because I wanted to? Because I chose to? The questions hung in the air, sharp with years of pain and misunderstanding. That's what it looked like, wasn't it? Max swallowed hard, his jaw tight. Yes, that's what it looked like. You disappeared. She let out a soft, bitter laugh, a sound devoid of humor. Of course it did. That's exactly what they wanted you to think. Who, Clara? Who wanted me to think that? The question was a demand, low and intense. Clara's gaze burned into his, accusatory, resolute. Your family, Maximilian. Your mother. The words landed like a physical punch to his gut. My mother? Eleanor? That's impossible. She wouldn't. Why would she? Disbelief warred with a dawning, sickening suspicion as he remembered his mother's cold, calculated nature. her relentless pursuit of power and control, especially over his life. Clara's eyes flashed with a pain that went deeper than her own suffering, pain for his blindness. Is it? Then tell me, Maximilian. Why, in 9 years, with all your resources, your power, why didn't you ever find me? Why didn't you ever ask anyone why I left? Max clenched his fists, the old narrative rushing forward, his defense mechanism kicking in. I thought you chose someone else. I thought you didn't want to be found. Clara inhaled sharply, shaking her head, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. I never did, Maximilian. I never would have. Then why, Clara? His voice was raw, filled with the agony of a decade of misplaced blame. Why did you disappear? Emily Clara looked away for a moment, gathering herself, the memory clearly painful. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but filled with the heavy weight of years of carrying this truth alone. Your mother. She came to see me, Maximilian. Max's breath caught in his throat. Eleanor? Seek out Clara? It was unthinkable. She told me I would never be good enough for you. Clara continued, her voice tightening with the remembered humiliation. That I was just a distraction. That my background was beneath you. Maximilian's entire body went rigid, a cold dread spreading through him. He had heard his mother use those words before, against others she deemed unsuitable for his world. At first, I didn't care about her words, Clara said, her voice gaining strength, recalling her younger, more defiant self. I loved you, Maximilian. I thought we could fight for each other, that our love was strong enough. But then, she swallowed hard, looking up at him, her eyes filled with a deep, lingering fear. But then she threatened me. Max's blood turned to ice. Threatened? What are you talking about? Threatened how? Clara's lips trembled, remembering the chilling specifics. She said if I didn't leave you, if I didn't disappear from your life completely, she would use her influence, her power to destroy my family, to ruin my father's business, to make sure we had nothing left. Her voice broke. And if I still refused to leave, she would make sure I regretted it in ways I couldn't imagine. Maximilian took a step back, as if the sheer weight of her words had physically knocked the air out of him. His mind raced, connecting the dots with sickening speed. His mother's ruthlessness, the sudden, inexplicable collapse of Clara's father's seemingly stable company, the scandals, the lawsuits, the bankruptcy. It had all happened right after Clara left. At the time, blinded by his own pain and belief in her betrayal, he had dismissed it as a tragic coincidence. Now he knew better. His mother hadn't just threatened. She had acted. She had destroyed Clara's life. And he had let it happen, never questioning, lost in his own self-pity. I had nothing, Maximilian, Clara said, her voice raw with the memory of that devastating time. She took everything. My family's home, my father's life's work, everything was gone. Her hands shook visibly at her sides, clutching at empty air. And then, her voice dropped, barely a whisper, yet the words landed with the force of a bomb. And then I found out I was pregnant. Maximilian's breath hitched, the air seizing in his lungs. Pregnant, with his child, at the very moment her world was being systematically destroyed by his mother. I had no money, she continued, tears finally streaming down her face, hot and unrestrained. No support, no one to turn to. Your mother's power, it felt absolute, felt like she was watching. I was alone, scared, and I had your child growing inside me. She met his gaze, her eyes glossy with tears, but she held herself firm, a testament to the strength forged in hardship. So I did the only thing I could, the only thing I thought would keep us safe. I survived. I disappeared. And I raised Noah alone. Maximilian felt like his heart was being ripped from his chest, torn apart by the sheer magnitude of the truth. He had spent 8 years believing she had betrayed him, chosen money over him. But she had been fighting for survival, stripped of everything, pregnant with his son. And he had never known, never been there, never once thought to question the convenient story he had been told, the story that painted her as the villain. A sharp, suffocating wave of guilt crashed into him, so intense it made his knees weak, made the opulent world outside this tiny apartment feel like a sickening mockery. He had been so blind, so damn blind, lost in his own pain. He had never seen the real tragedy she had endured. And now, now he had to face the one person responsible for all of it. The woman who had destroyed his past and stolen his future. His mother. The shocking truth is out. Eleanor Vance orchestrated their separation and hid the existence of Maximilian's son. What will happen when Maximilian confronts his own mother? Drop your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, and if you're hooked, subscribe so you don't miss the next. Maximilian Sterling didn't waste a second. Leaving Clara in her small apartment, the weight of the truth a crushing burden in his chest, he drove. Not back to his sterile penthouse, but across the city, towards the imposing old-money stronghold he had grown up in, the Sterling estate. A place he hadn't set foot in for years, a symbol of the legacy that had just been revealed as a gilded cage built on lies. Rage, cold and pure, fueled his journey. Betrayal, sharp and deep, tightened his grip on the steering wheel. When he stormed into the grand, opulent foyer, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor, his mother, Eleanor Vance, looked up from her seat in the lavishly decorated parlor. Surrounded by antiques and portraits of ancestors, she was the picture of refined, untouchable power. Her lips curled into a slight, composed smile, but Max could see the sharp, assessing calculation in her eyes, the look of a woman always in control, always evaluating. "Maximilian," she greeted smoothly, her voice calm, utterly unperturbed by his sudden, unannounced arrival. "What a surprise. I thought you were busy running the empire." Max didn't waste time on pleasantries. He threw the truth, raw and ugly, in her face, letting the pain and anger of a decade ignite the room. "You destroyed her life." Eleanor's smile didn't falter, not by an inch. She exhaled lightly, a sound of mild amusement, as if the conversation were merely a minor inconvenience. "Ah," she said, setting her porcelain teacup down with a delicate click. "So you finally found out." Finally. Like she had always known this moment would come, and had prepared for it. Max's blood boiled, the detached confirmation fueling his fury. "Why?" His voice was dangerously low, shaking with suppressed emotion. "Why did you do it, Mother? Why did you ruin her?" His mother sighed, a theatrical gesture of impatience, straightening her already perfect posture. "Because Maximilian," she stated, her voice cool and absolute, dismissing Clara's entire existence with a wave of her hand. "She was never meant to be part of our world. She was unsuitable, a distraction." Max's hands curled into fists at his sides, the desire to shatter something, anything, almost overwhelming. "She was mine to love." Eleanor's expression hardened, the cold steel beneath the polished facade showing through. "You are a Sterling, Maximilian. Your life is not ruled by fleeting emotions like love. It is ruled by legacy, by power, by ensuring the continuation of our name, our influence. I did what was necessary, for the family, for you. You stole my son from me." Maximilian's voice thundered through the opulent room, the accusation tearing through the carefully constructed silence of the estate. For the first time, his mother's composed expression faltered. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something Max couldn't decipher, surprise? Perhaps even a sliver of regret, crossing her face before the mask snapped back into place. Maximilian stepped closer, his entire body trembling with the force of his rage, the depth of his betrayal, the sickening disgust he felt for the woman who had given him life. "You didn't just destroy Clara," he said, his voice dropping to a low, chilling intensity. "You destroyed me. You hollowed me out, made me believe the woman I loved betrayed me, made me build my life on a lie." He leaned in, his voice breaking slightly with the raw pain. And you made absolutely sure. I never even knew I had a child. Eleanor lifted her chin, regaining her composure, her gaze hardening once more into the familiar, unyielding matriarch. If I hadn't intervened, Maximilian, you wouldn't be where you are today. You wouldn't have built this empire. Your emotions for that girl would have held you back. Max laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that echoed the emptiness he'd carried for years. And what exactly do I have, mother? He met her gaze, his eyes cold, haunted, stripped bare of the ambition she valued. Because right now, standing here, knowing what you did, I feel like I have absolutely nothing. His mother stared at him, speechless for the first time, her carefully constructed world momentarily faltering under the weight of his pain and accusation. Maximilian took a step back, the fire in his eyes replaced by a cold, resolute conviction that chilled him to the bone. You are no longer part of my life, mother. His voice was quiet, final, carrying more authority than any boardroom declaration. Neither is this house. Neither is this legacy. He turned away, his entire body rigid with fury, with sorrow, with a newfound purpose that burned brighter than any ambition had before. I have a son, he said, his voice filled with a fierce, protective love. I have a family. He paused at the entrance to the parlor, looking back at the woman who sat amidst her wealth and portraits, alone. And I will spend the rest of my life making things right with them, building something real, something you could never understand. He didn't look back as he walked out of the grand foyer, leaving the silent estate and the woman who had orchestrated so much pain behind him. He had lost too much time already, a decade stolen, a son he never knew, a love he thought was lost forever. But he wouldn't lose another second. Now his focus was absolute. He was going to fight, not with money, not with power, but with his heart. He was going to fight for Clara, for Noah, for the life that had been stolen from them. And this time no one, absolutely no one, would stand in his way. His confrontation with Eleanor Vance had stripped away the last remnants of Maximilian Sterling's old life. The anger remained, a sharp, cold presence, but it was now channeled towards a singular, unshakable purpose. Winning back Clara and building a life with his son, Noah. Maximilian Carter had built an empire with his hands, his mind, and his ruthlessness. He had acquired industries, crushed competitors, and amassed power beyond imagination. But now he faced his greatest challenge, and it wasn't in a boardroom. It was in the eyes of a woman who no longer trusted him, and in the guarded heart of a little boy who wanted nothing to do with him. Maximilian had resources beyond belief. His first instinct, honed by decades of problem-solving through acquisition, was to fix things the way he always did, with money. He found a beautiful, spacious house in a safe, tree-lined neighborhood, with a large yard that he imagined Noah playing in. He arranged for access to the best doctors, discussed enrollment in top-tier schools, and set up trusts to ensure Clara and Noah would never have to worry about financial security again. He showed up at Clara's apartment with the documents, expecting relief, perhaps even gratitude, for removing the burden of their struggles. But her reaction stunned him more profoundly than any market downturn ever had. "Take it back, Maximilian." Her voice was quiet, firm, utterly devoid of the awe or deference his wealth usually commanded. His brows furrowed, confusion replacing his usual confidence. "Clara, I'm trying to help, to provide. This is a safe home, security for Noah's future." She crossed her arms, a familiar defensive posture, but there was weariness etched around her eyes. "Help? You think throwing money at us will erase 8 years of pain, Maximilian? 8 years of struggling alone? 8 years of Noah asking where his father is?" Max clenched his jaw, the accusation hitting home. "I'm trying to do what's right, Clara, to make up for lost time." "No." Her voice was gentle this time, but unwavering. "You're trying to do what's easy, what's familiar." She shook her head slowly. "Noah doesn't need a rich father, Maximilian. He doesn't need your bank account. He needs one who actually cares. One who shows up, not just with money, but with time." with effort. Her words hit deeper than he expected. Money was all he had ever known, his primary tool, the one thing he could always control, the thing that made him powerful. But here, in the face of Clara's quiet strength and Noah's unseen pain, it meant nothing. It was useless. And for the first time in his life, Maximilian Sterling didn't know what to do. His most powerful weapon was ineffective. If winning over Clara was difficult, winning over Noah was even harder. The boy remained distant, guarded. Every attempt Max made to connect, to bridge the gap, was met with silence, averted eyes, or a subtle physical withdrawal. Max tried taking him out for ice cream, talking about school, showing interest in his drawings. But Noah would shut down, retreating behind a wall of quiet resentment. One evening, after walking Noah home from school, a routine Max had started. Just showing up, being there, he knelt down, trying to find the right words, trying to explain the inexplicable absence of a lifetime. "Noah," he began softly, his voice a little rough. "I know I wasn't there before. I know I missed everything. But I want to be here now. If you'll let me." Noah didn't look up. His small hands curled into fists inside his pockets. "It's too late," he said, his voice small, final. Maximilian felt a sharp, physical sting in his chest, the boy's words landing like a poisoned dart. It doesn't have to be. We can still build something." Noah finally looked at him, his brown eyes, so like Clara's, filled with a deep, complex mix of hurt, anger, and confusion. His lower lip trembled slightly, but his voice, though quiet, was laced with the raw pain of abandonment. "Where were you?" he asked, the simple question an indictment against a decade of absence. "Where were you when Mom had to work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on? Where were you when we had nothing? When other kids had dads at their school plays? Where were you?" Maximilian's breath hitched, tears stinging his own eyes. He had no answer, because the truth was he had been nowhere, lost in his own pain, blind to Clara's struggle, unaware of his son's existence. He had been building an empire, accumulating power, while his family was surviving on grit and sheer will. And now his son resented him for it, a resentment that was fully, undeniably justified. Money couldn't fix this. Power couldn't command love or trust. Days passed. Weeks. Maximilian refused to give up, but he didn't push. He simply showed up. Every day. Being there. A quiet, consistent presence in their lives, hoping that time, and his unwavering presence, might begin to erode the walls built by pain and misunderstanding. He was learning, slowly and painfully, that the most valuable things in life couldn't be acquired, negotiated, or bought. They had to be earned. And he had a very long way to go. Days blurred into weeks, each one a quiet test of resolve. Maximilian Sterling continued to show up, not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with a quiet, unwavering presence that was both challenging and, slowly, subtly, becoming familiar. He waited outside Noah's school, walked him part of the way home, sat in the car down the street from Clara's apartment in the evenings, just being there. He didn't push for conversation, didn't force interaction. He was simply present, learning slowly and painfully what it meant to build trust from the ground up, one quiet, uncertain moment at a time. Clara watched him, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. The man who had shattered her world was now a constant, patient fixture on her street. She saw him waiting, saw the genuine, quiet determination in his posture, so different from the arrogant power she remembered. Part of her wanted to slam the door, to tell him to disappear again, to protect herself and Noah from further pain. But another part, a small, fragile part she'd thought was long dead, was stirred by his persistence, by the raw truth she had seen in his eyes when he confronted his mother. Then, one day, everything shifted. Maximilian had just left a meeting downtown, the familiar hum of his car a backdrop to his thoughts about inventory reports, when his phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice was tight, panicked, a sound he hadn't heard in years. "Maximilian." "It's Noah. Something happened at school." Max's heart stopped, the corporate world vanishing instantly. Clara? What is it? Is he hurt? He's okay, he's just upset. Some older kids. Her voice trailed off, filled with distress. He's outside the main entrance. I'm heading there now. I'm on my way, Max said, ending the call, his focus narrowing to a single point. Noah. When Maximilian arrived at Noah's school minutes later, pulling up to the curb, a wave of protective rage burned through him. Noah sat hunched on the steps, backpack beside him, face turned away, shoulders trembling. Clara was crouched beside him, her arm around him, trying to offer comfort, her own face etched with worry and anger. Max got out of the car, his usual composed demeanor replaced by a fierce, protective intensity. He walked towards them, the concerned murmurs of a few passing parents fading away. He knelt down beside Noah, his voice low, gentle, pushing aside his own surging emotions to focus only on the boy. Noah, hey, what happened? Noah hesitated, biting his lip, refusing to look up. Some kids, Clara prompted gently, her hand rubbing his back. Noah finally spoke, his voice small, muffled, thick with tears he was trying to hide. They said I was a charity case. Maximilian's blood boiled, his fists clenching. He knew exactly where that twisted piece of cruelty came from. Eleanor's world. Noah clenched his small fists, his voice cracking with pain and humiliation. They said my dad didn't want me. That's why he was never there. Maximilian's stomach twisted painfully. The words, thrown carelessly by bullies, struck at the core of Noah's deepest wound. A wound Max was directly responsible for, however indirectly. This time Max didn't hesitate. He gently took Noah's shoulders, turning the boy to face him, making sure Noah saw only him, not the judging eyes of others, not the cruel kids. Hey! Max's voice was steady, certain, pouring every ounce of his sincerity into the single word. They're wrong, Noah. Noah's eyes, red-rimmed and filled with doubt, finally met Max's gaze. They're completely wrong, Max repeated, his voice soft but firm. He swallowed hard, the guilt a bitter taste in his mouth, but he didn't shy away from the truth of the lost years. I didn't know about you, Noah. I didn't know you were here. He took a shaky breath, his voice thick with emotion, making the most important promise of his life. But now that I do, I swear to you, I will never leave you again. Noah hesitated, his gaze searching Max's face, looking for any sign of the man from the magazine, the man who walked away. But he saw only the man kneeling before him, eyes filled with a raw, earnest truth he hadn't expected. Then, slowly, hesitantly, Noah nodded. It was small, barely noticeable, a tiny dip of his chin. But for Maximilian Sterling, it meant everything. A crack in the wall, a flicker of fragile trust. Because in that moment, he realized more powerfully than ever before. He couldn't lose his son again. Not now. Not ever. Clara, watching the exchange from just a few feet away, felt tears sting her own eyes. She saw the raw pain on Maximilian's face, the absolute sincerity in his promise, the way he knelt there, offering his presence, his commitment, not his money. She saw the slow, hesitant way Noah looked at him, and the tiny, monumental nod. In that moment, she saw not the cold billionaire, but the man she had loved, finally becoming the father their son needed. A fragile, dangerous hope, buried deep for years, began to stir in her heart. Maybe it wasn't too late after all. The school incident was a turning point, a fragile bridge built across a chasm of lost years. Maximilian Sterling's promise, "I will never leave you again," echoed not just in Noah's young heart, but in Clara's cautious one as well. The walls didn't vanish overnight, but they lowered enough to allow for tentative steps towards building something new. Maximilian continued his unwavering presence, now coupled with small, consistent efforts that spoke louder than any fortune. He started showing up early, not just to walk Noah to school, but learning how to pack a lunchbox, fumbling with sandwich bags and juice boxes, a stark contrast to the effortless command he wielded in boardrooms. He stayed late into the evenings sometimes, not discussing mergers, but sitting at their small kitchen table, grappling with Noah's homework, his brow furrowed in concentration over a math problem he'd last seen 4 decades ago. One day, Clara came home from her waitressing shift to find Maximilian on the roof of their worn-down building, sleeves rolled up on a shirt that cost more than her rent, grease smudge on his cheek, working alongside the building's superintendent to fix a persistent leak in the ceiling of her apartment. She stared up at him, utterly baffled. "You could have just hired someone to do that, Maximilian," she said, the understatement hanging in the air. "He could have bought the whole building." He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, offering her a rare, genuine smirk, one that reminded her fleetingly of the man she'd fallen in love with. "I know, but I wanted to." He gestured to the dripping ceiling visible through the open roof access. "Noah needs a dry room." Clara didn't know how to respond to that. This wasn't Maximilian Sterling, the untouchable billionaire, the force of nature. This was Maximilian Sterling, the man willing to get his hands dirty, not because he had to, but because he cared. He was trying, truly trying, and against her better judgment, against the years of guarding her heart, she felt something inside begin to soften, a thaw in the frozen landscape of her emotions. Slowly, hesitantly, Noah began to let him in. The initial resentment didn't disappear entirely, but it was layered now with curiosity, with a dawning sense of having a father figure in his life. He still asked hard questions sometimes, echoes of past pain, but he also started sharing things, a drawing from school, a story about a friend, asking for help with a Lego set. One night, as Maximilian helped Noah with his math homework at the kitchen table, Clara stood by the doorway, watching. Months ago, Noah would have refused to let Maximilian even look at his school books. Now Noah was smiling, laughing softly. Maximilian ruffled Noah's hair, shaking his head at a calculation error. "Man, I was never this good at math, even with a fancy tutor." Noah grinned, a bright, open expression that melted Clara's heart. "You're a billionaire. You have to be good at math." Maximilian chuckled, the sound warm and relaxed, so different from the clipped tones he used in his professional life. "That's what accountants are for, kid." Noah let out a small laugh, a sound that filled the apartment with a simple joy. Clara's chest tightened, tears stinging her eyes, because in that moment she saw it. Saw the natural, easy way Maximilian was becoming the father Noah never had. Saw the way he was becoming the man she had once loved, shedding the layers of cynicism and power he'd built after she was gone. He wasn't just showing up, he was settling in. And maybe, just maybe, she was falling for him all over again. The soft glow of fairy lights illuminated the small backyard behind their apartment building, casting a golden hue over the carefully decorated space. The scent of freshly baked cake, a labor of love Maximilian had actually helped bake, resulting in flour everywhere and more laughter than frustration. And grilled food filled the air, mixing with the sound of laughter, genuine, warm, and full of life. It was Noah's birthday party, and for the first time in his life, he had both his parents there with him, together. Maximilian stood in the middle of it all, watching as Noah tore open his gifts with uncontained excitement, his small hands moving rapidly. Clara stood beside him, her arms folded, a small, genuine smile playing on her lips as she watched their son. Maximilian turned to her, his voice low, for her ears only, but full of meaning. "He's happy, Clara." She glanced up at him, her eyes soft. "He is." For a brief, silent moment, their eyes met, and there it was, the connection that had never truly faded, buried beneath years of pain and separation. The love that had always been there, waiting. And tonight, under the fairy lights, surrounded by the simple joy of their son's birthday, it felt like they had finally found their way back to each other. As the night continued, Maximilian stayed close to Noah, helping him with his new toy set, showing him how to assemble the pieces, his large, capable hands surprisingly gentle with the plastic bricks. Noah had been cautious at first, still adjusting to the idea of having his father physically present, interacting with him. But then it happened. As Maximilian reached for another piece, Noah suddenly looked up at him, uncertain, hesitant, a question in his eyes. Then softly, tentatively, "Dad, can you help me with this one?" Maximilian froze. For a moment the world stopped. Noah had never called him that before. Not once. Not until now. His hand shook slightly as he picked up the toy piece, swallowing the sudden, overwhelming tightness in his throat. Tears stung his eyes, but he blinked them back. "Yeah," he said, his voice hoarse, thick with emotion. "Of course, son." Clara, watching from a few feet away, her heart swelling, felt tears sting her eyes again, tears of profound relief and joy, because in that single word she knew Liam had finally let his father in. And Maximilian had found the one thing he never knew he was missing. The validation, the connection, the love that no amount of money or power could ever provide. As the birthday party wound down, the laughter softening, the guests beginning to leave, Maximilian Sterling pulled Clara gently aside. They stood under the soft glow of the backyard fairy lights, the night air cool but comfortable, the remnants of celebration around them. Maximilian took a slow, deep breath, gathering his thoughts, his heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and absolute certainty. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and a fragile hope swirling within them. "Maximilian, let me say this first," he interrupted gently, his hand steady as he held the box, but his heart hammering against his ribs like a drum. "Clara, I lost you once because I was blind, because I believed the wrong things, because I let other people make decisions for me, because I was lost in my own pain." He took a step closer, his gaze intense, earnest. "I refuse to lose you again. Not now. Not ever." Clara's breath hitched, tears blurring her vision, mirroring the moment years ago when she'd realized the magnitude of his mother's betrayal. Maximilian opened the box, revealing a ring. It was simple, elegant, timeless, a single silver band. No elaborate jewels, nothing ostentatious. Just a word engraved on the inside. He held it up slightly so she could see it. The word was whole. "I'm not asking you this because of responsibility," he said, his voice thick with emotion, his gaze fixed on hers. "Not because we share Noah, though he is the greatest gift I've ever received." His voice shook slightly, raw and vulnerable, stripped of the power and control he wielded so easily in his other life. "I'm asking you because I love you, Clara." He met her gaze, pouring every ounce of the last painful, revealing months, every shared quiet moment, every rediscovered feeling into the simple words. "I always have, even when I thought I hated you, and I always will." A tear slipped down Clara's cheek, then another. Maximilian swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Marry me, Clara." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant city hum and the beating of their hearts. For a moment, lost in the gravity of the question, he wasn't sure what she would say. Had he done enough? Could she truly trust him after everything? But then, she smiled. A real, genuine, breathtaking smile that lit up her entire face and banished the shadows of the past. And softly, simply, she whispered, "Yes, Maximilian, yes." A breath of profound relief and pure joy escaped him, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close, burying his face in her hair. And as he held her, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his, he knew this was home. Not the penthouses, not the sprawling estates, not the offshore accounts or the business empire. This woman, this child, this fragile, resilient family they were rebuilding together. This was all he had ever truly needed. And now he would never let them go again. As the stars began to sparkle above the city and the last of the guests departed, Noah ran towards them, his voice filled with the innocent excitement of his birthday. "Mom? Dad? Look, I got more gifts." Clara chuckled, wiping a tear from her eye, her heart full. "That's great, sweetheart." Maximilian bent down, opening his arms, a warmth spreading through him that was more potent than any power he had ever commanded. "Come here, kid." Noah hesitated only for a second, the last vestiges of doubt melting away in the face of this man who always showed up now, who looked at him with nothing but love. Then he ran straight into his father's arms. Maximilian lifted him up, holding him close, the small, sturdy body a weight that anchored him to everything real and important. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. And as he stood there, under the soft glow of the party lights, with Clara by his side and Noah in his arms, he realized they weren't just fixing the past. They were building a future, together, a future filled with love, trust, and the promise of forever. Maximilian Sterling thought he had everything: power, wealth, success. But in the end, none of it truly mattered compared to the love he almost lost and the son he never knew. Love, the kind that truly mattered, wasn't about getting a second chance handed to you. It was about earning it. Maximilian fought for his family, not with money or power, but with his heart, his presence, his vulnerability, and his unwavering commitment. And in doing so, he didn't just reclaim what was stolen. He built something even stronger, more precious, and more real than any empire. And that's the story of Maximilian, Clara, and Noah, a journey of lost love, devastating secrets, and the powerful fight to build a family from the ground up. It's a reminder that no matter how broken the past is, love, courage, and the willingness to earn trust always have the power to heal and create a future. If this story touched your heart, made you tear up, or simply reminded you of what truly matters, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below your favorite moment. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more emotional and heartwarming tales. Thank you for being part of our family. We'll see you in the next one for another unforgettable story that touches the heart.